Alright y'all, we're closing out the first half with Scott Hall, one half of the Outsiders, one-on-one with the modern-day Maharaja Jinder Mahal.
And he's hot off the second win of the Hulk Hogan.
This next match is scheduled for one fall with a 15-minute time limit. Introducing first, from Las Vegas, Nevada, weighing 285 pounds, the Razor, Scott Hall. Scott Hall isn't a happy camper right now, with he and Kevin Nash still living down their 4-minute loss to the Psychedelics, so I'm betting that the bad guy is hoping for better luck against Jinder Mahal. On the flip side of that, Jinder is hot off another win in his last match, but he and Scott Hall have never faced each other in a singles match.
That's exactly how I looked at it, so I think it's going to be a pretty good match.
And it isn't very often that we get to see Scott Hall, the bad guy, in single competition. It's usually in a tag team situation with Kevin Nash, and this should be exciting.
His opponent from the Punjab in India weighing 234 pounds, he's the modern-day Maharaja, Jinder Mahal.
And speaking of exciting, this man has been generating it in droves for almost 9 months. The modern-day Maharaja Jinder Mahal, since arriving in RWL, has aggressively faced all comers and come up roses more often than not.
One thing I have noticed is that Jinder Mahal has been very quiet about his intentions in RWL. He's never rude, just gives glib answers to everything. I mean, to be the best doesn't tell me a whole lot about you. He's sure playing his game, close and quiet.
He plays it close to the vest, which around here is probably a smart thing to do. A lot of double dealing and backstabbing. It's better everybody keeps their business to themselves.
All right, our first half closer about to get underway here. Jinder Mahal looking determined. Referee Willie Johnson sounds the bell. They come center ring. Whoa! Swing and a miss from Jinder Mahal. Scott Hall with a knee to the midsection. Jinder countered with a right and a kick. A second kick. A third. A left. A chop. Well, now Scott Hall reeling towards the far corner. Down he goes. Jinder Mahal taking Scott Hall down with a series of blows. Now stomping the arm. Scott Hall. Jinder Mahal goes right into a submission. Near the far corner, the referee checking it out. Scott Hall finding his way out. Whoa, nice toss from Scott Hall. Scott Hall stomping the hands of Jinder Mahal, and well, unsportsmanlike conduct. Well, here it is. Scott Hall spins Jinder around with a hard right, has him up in an electric chair. But whoa, Jinder with hard shots to the top of the skull, goes behind on Scott Hall, tags him with a right. Jinder Mahal with Scott Hall up over the shoulders, drops him head first into the turnbuckle, follows it up with a series of stomps. Jinder Mahal putting the boots, really putting the boots to Scott Hall. Scott Hall collapses out of the corner. Jinder Mahal makes his way to the top turnbuckle. Modern day Maharaja getting ready to go high risk here. Missile shoulder takes Scott Hall down. Jinder covers one, but only a 1 count. Scott Hall back up on his feet, catches a kick, a left, a chop. Jinder Mahal just raining blows on Scott Hall, drives him head first into the turnbuckle, drives a shoulder into the midsection, and alley-oop Scott Hall out of the corner. Jinder Mahal returning the favor with a blatant choke. The modern day Maharaja with a soccer kick to the chest, followed up with another, and yet another. Jinder Mahal, absolutely aggressive against Scott Hall in this matchup. A shoulder tackle from Scott Hall, followed up with a stomp, and a low drop kick to the back of the head of Jinder Mahal. Jinder slams him down to the canvas by his arm. Jinder Mahal again making his way to the top turnbuckle. Scott Hall standing up center ring. And Jinder Mahal changes his mind, opting instead for a neck breaker center ring, and he nailed it and goes for a cover here, an arrogant cover at that. 1, 2. Well, that would have been beautiful had it worked. Jinder Mahal countered by Scott Hall with a dragon screw. A stomp to the midsection. Scott Hall countered again by Jinder Mahal. Inverted DDT. Slamming the back of the head of Scott Hall to the canvas. And here we go. Jinder Mahal calling for it, but no. He will not get the clutch on Scott Hall this time. A kick to the midsection. Scott Hall misses. Delivers a kick to the leg instead. A chop. Locks up Jinder Mahal. Whips him to the far corner. Jinder Mahal set up on the top turnbuckle. Scott Hall with evil intentions here. Has him all the way. Look at this. Shades of Jimmy Superfly Snuka right there. Scott Hall spins Jinder Mahal around with a right. Has him all the way up. Electric chair drop. Jinder Mahal covered. 1, 2. But the modern day Maharaja powering out of the pin. A vicious elbow to the back of the head from Scott Hall. Jinder Mahal slams him face down again. Drives all his weight into the lower back of Scott Hall. And repeats the process. Softening him up because he's going to nail him with that camel clutch. You can almost be certain. Scott Hall whipped to the far corner. A kick to the ribs and a grinding of the face into the top rope from Jinder Mahal. Slams his head down to the canvas. Gathers him up again. A right, a left, a right. A chop, a left. And a headlock punch. And now Jinder Mahal just battering Scott Hall down towards the canvas. Finally succeeds in getting him there. Jinder Mahal makes his way to the top turnbuckle. Here we go, elbow across the chest. From the top, here's a cover. 1, 2, and another near fall. Scott Hall somehow finding his way out. And again, he can forget about sportsmanlike conduct from either one of these two at this point. Scott Hall standing to his feet. Jinder Mahal locks him up. Oh, didn't get the submission either. Scott Hall wise to Jinder Mahal's game. Two-handed choke toss countered by Jinder Mahal. There's a kick to the midsection, a chop, a left, a kick, another chop, another left, another headlock punch to Scott Hall, and again Jinder Mahal mercilessly battering Scott Hall towards the canvas. Unbelievable aggression from the modern day Maharaja. Jinder Mahal rolls Scott Hall over. 1, 2. And one would have thought it would have been over at that point, but no, Scott Hall slammed head down. Jinder Mahal sets it up, another kick to the chest to Scott Hall. Scott Hall counters, gets back up on his feet. Rounds up Jinder Mahal. Uh-oh, here we go. Scott Hall setting it up. There it is, the razor's edge. And down goes Jinder Mahal. Scott Hall covers. This could be a wrap. 1, 2. Unbelievable. Jinder Mahal getting the left shoulder up before the count of 3. Scott Hall countered with a jawbreaker. Jumping neckbreaker countered by Scott Hall. Very impressive. A clubbing overhand right from Scott and a disrespectful slap to the face. And right into a choke. for Jinder Mahal again. Oh man, Scott Hall making his way to the top turnbuckle. Here we go, an elbow across the chest for the modern day Maharaja. And now Scott Hall regaining control of this matchup. The referee calling for the break. Jinder Mahal too close to the ropes. Scott Hall bopping and weaving over here. And a discus punch that got turned into a hip toss by Jinder Mahal with amazing speed. Scott Hall back up to a standing position, slams Jinder Mahal face down into the canvas, drives a knee into the head of Jinder Mahal, follows it up with a stomp. Scott Hall with a hard right, keeping Jinder down on the canvas, and he does it again. All of a sudden, Scott Hall regains control of this matchup. He's got Jinder Mahal up in that fireman's carry. Oh, look at this. Slams him down. And now Scott Hall, sensing perhaps the end may be near. And he's setting it up again. The razor's edge. That jackknife powerbomb. And there it is. This could be the end of Jinder Mahal right here. Scott Hall covers. 1, 2. Are you kidding me? Scott Hall questioning the count of Willie Johnson. He's got Jinder by the throat. Jinder counters with an elbow, locks up Scott Hall. Has him up, vertical suplex. The modern day Maharaja. This may have snatched this one away. A stomp to the midsection to Scott Hall, and here he is. He's calling for it. There's the camel clutch on Scott Hall's center ring. No ropes to get to. Scott Hall in big time trouble. He is tapped. No, the referee's calling for the bell. That's it. Jinder Mahal defeating Scott Hall by submission.
The time was 9 minutes and 8 seconds. Your winner, Jinder Mahal.
The modern day Maharaja continuing to amaze Jinder Mahal, coming up with a tap out victory over Scott Hall. And well, as far as his progress goes, how high is up? If he keeps winning like that, up is going to be wherever he wants it to be done.
Well, fans, that concludes the first half of tonight's RWL Rage. And when we return with the second half, we have got championship matches galore. We'll see you there.